The most feared man in the early church was not a Roman. He was a scholar with arrest letters in his hand. To stop him, heaven did not send an army. It sent light. And for 3 days after, the hunter sat blind and did not eat and did not drink. This is the story few know. Jerusalem, a few short years after the crucifixion. A young believer named Stephen was dragged before the council on the word of men willing to lie. Every man in that room stared at him and saw that his face was like the face of an angel. Stephen looked up, past every furious face in the room, and told them what he saw. "I see heaven open, and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." They rushed him, drove him outside the city, and reached for stones. The witnesses laid their garments at the feet of a young man named Saul. Stephen went to his knees under the stones and cried, "Lord, do not hold this sin against them." And then he was gone. Saul watched all of it and approved. What followed was a hunt. Saul began to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off men and women and put them in prison. Doors broken in, a city emptying as believers fled. By his own account, years later, when they were put to death, he cast his vote. Jerusalem was not enough. Saul went to the high priest and asked for letters to the synagogues of Damascus, sealed papyrus granting him authority to bind any follower of the way, as the first believers were called, man or woman, and march them back in chains. Scripture describes him in that season with one phrase, breathing out murderous threats. 6 days on foot, north from Jerusalem, with the letters riding in his satchel like a blade waiting to be drawn. Somewhere on that last stretch of road, at midday, it happened. Suddenly a light from heaven blazed around him, brighter than the noon sun. Saul fell to the ground and heard a voice, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Not, "Why do you persecute them?" "Why do you persecute me?" Every prisoner Saul had taken, heaven had counted as its own. Face down in the dust, Saul asked the only question left, "Who are you, Lord?" And the answer gave the manhunt its true name. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." The men beside him stood speechless. They heard the voice, they saw no man. There was nothing to see but light. When Saul rose from the ground and opened his eyes, the world was gone. The man who carried letters of arrest was led into Damascus by the hand, like a child. He had come to drag believers out of that city. He entered it unable to find a door. They brought him to a house on Straight Street, and there he sat. For 3 days he was without sight, and he did not eat or drink anything. No mob, no trial, no voice from heaven now, just a shuttered room, untouched bread, and the dark. Saul had memorized the law and the prophets. He was trained under the greatest teacher of his age, and now in the dark, every verse he knew began to read differently. The scholar reread his whole life and found himself on the wrong side of it. Some men are broken by blindness. Saul was broken by what he finally saw. And Scripture records exactly one thing he did in that room. Heaven itself gives the report, 3 words, "He is praying." The most feared man in the church on his knees in the dark. Across the city lived a disciple named Ananias, one of the very people Saul had come to arrest. The Lord spoke to him in a vision. "Go to Straight Street and ask for Saul of Tarsus." Ananias argued, "Lord, I have heard what this man has done." The answer ended the argument. "This man is my chosen instrument to carry my name before the Gentiles and their kings, and before the people of Israel. So Ananias walked to the house of his enemy, stood over the man who had come to chain him, and laid hands on him. The first word Saul heard was, "Brother." At that instant, something like scales fell from Saul's eyes, and his sight was restored. He got up and was baptized. The first face he saw in his new life was the face of the man he had been hunting, calling him family. Damascus had been warned an inquisitor was coming. Instead, Saul walked into its synagogues, the same rooms his letters were addressed to, and preached that Jesus is the Son of God. The congregation sat stunned, asking one question: "Isn't this the man who wreaked havoc in Jerusalem on those who call on this name?" The arrest warrants were still in his baggage. The man they authorized no longer existed. Then, by his own telling, he vanished into Arabia for 3 years. No apostle taught him, no counsel sent him. When he returned to Damascus and kept preaching, the answer this time was not a letter, but a knife. His former allies took counsel to kill him. They watched the city gates day and night. The governor posted a garrison on the walls. Every road out of Damascus was a trap. The believers of Damascus, the hunted, now smuggled the hunter out. A house built against the city wall had a window over the drop. One night, his disciples took him and lowered him in a basket through a window in the wall. The rope paid out hand over hand down the stone. He had marched toward Damascus, carrying the power of the high priest. He left it swinging on a rope in the dark. In Jerusalem, no one believed it. When Saul tried to join the disciples, they scattered from him. Some traps, they reasoned, look exactly like a conversion. One man vouched for him, Barnabas, a name the apostles trusted. He stood before them and told the road, the light, the preaching at Damascus. The door opened. The church took in the man who had torn it apart. And then a line Scripture gives almost in a whisper. The church throughout Judea, Galilee, and Samaria experienced a time of peace. It grew in strength and numbers. The storm had a name, and the name now belonged to the other side. Believers who had fled him heard the news in the scattered towns. The man who formerly persecuted us is now preaching the faith he once tried to destroy. And in that, they praised God. The man struck blind at noon spent the rest of his life writing about light. 13 books of the New Testament carry his name. He signed them Paul. It began on a road with a light brighter than the sun and a question: why? Paul chased that light across the empire until it cost him everything and he counted it gain. But where that light first entered the world, in a stable under a star, is another story.